Alright, Travis Wingutso. This one's going to be put into the YouTube library for you. Even though we still have 15 minutes, follow up on the previous video of the Logan Mormon who vandalized the temple. They do that with all criminals against the church. If you go against the church, you're mentally ill. That's how it is. So when I sued the church in 2008, they had no intention of sending me to prison. They had no intention of taking my case to court. They purposely tortured me to get a confession of guilt, but they were quick to notice right away there was no way I was going to plead guilty. I was filing a lawsuit. But they still followed the standard process to get away with it and cover up what that I had filed the lawsuit against them, as they sealed the case and charged me with being a terrorist to justify sealing the case, and calling my lawsuit a weapon of mass destruction. So when I saw that this guy had been rehabilitated no, guys, catch on, he pled guilty. So he's now labeled for the rest of his life as mentally ill. But he gets to skip going to prison for committing crimes against the church. That's how they work here in Utah. So he'll be drugged and will be monitored for the rest of his life. Not too dissimilar from sexual offenders who have to be put on the sex offender registry. So if you're 18 years old and you have a 17-year-old girlfriend, and the 17-year-old girlfriend's parents don't like the boy who's 18 years old and dating their daughter who's 17 years old, they can charge you with statutory rape just for dating her. And it was called in among the prisoners, it's prisoners when you're in jail, in the Salt Lake County Jail, as the Romeo crime. And I saw one such case going to court. Just 18 years old, she was 17, and the guy obviously was scared to death. But yeah, the parents didn't like him, so busted for the rest of his life because he had a girlfriend who he turned 18 first. So that's how things are under our current legal system, especially here in Utah. Utah specifically, if you commit a religious crime, they destroy your life through the mental health court, through the mental process. The Utah State Hospital is not a hospital. They don't have doctors there. They have people with PhD doctorates, but they don't have doctors. And so, as I've been telling you, psychiatry is a fraud. It's a pseudoscience. No hard science scientist recognizes the pseudoscience of psychiatry. It is a complete and utter fraud. They don't have cures because they don't even look for a cause. You go in, you sit on the recliner couch, as typified in cartoons and movies and TV shows, and you just spill your guts, your emotions. And then at the end of the session, They prescribe you drugs. Psychiatrists prescribe drugs. Therapists can't prescribe drugs. You have to be a psychiatrist. And the therapist can recommend it, but a doctor has to sign off on it. And yeah, you're drugged for the rest of your life. There is no such thing. And so, because it's a system set up in place to require humans to keep your job secure, it becomes a human trafficking ring. And they do criminal activities because they're not beholden like a medical doctor who takes the Hippocratic oath to do no harm. So when a medical doctor is in partnership with a pharmacy to force patients into a new drug that the pharmacy wants tested on human lab rats, the doctor loses their license, they lose their job, obviously, and big scandals. But in psychiatry, nope, all's fair in that one. And the courts recognize psychiatrists as doctors so that there's patient confidentiality, so the psychiatrist can just tell the judge what the judge wants to hear and torture human beings, because they're not beholden to the do no harm principle. They're not beholden to not use humans as lab rats for pharmaceutical companies. It just doesn't exist. And it's a horrible racket that's going on with psychiatry. And like I told you, we are brainwashed from our youth into a cultural brainwashing. Like I said, colors don't have emotions. They don't have gender assignments. But yet we are trained from infancy by our parents, who've been brainwashed by their infancy, into that brainwashing system. Pink is not a girl's color, it's not a boy's color, it's nobody's color, it's just color. Yellow does not mean happiness, it doesn't change your mood. Again, as infants, our parents assign the emotions we're supposed to have with certain colors. So if we were to paint the baby's room black and give the baby a loving, caring environment, they won't associate black with scary, evil, dark. They just understand that with the dark room, they were loved. And To the Devil a Daughter is a perfect example of that kind of brainwashing that takes place in our society, where Paulina was raised as it was the Church of Lucifer, but they wore the priestly neck collars of Catholics, and they posed as religious type Catholics per se, but they didn't really seem to call them Catholics. But she believed that they loved her and were taking care of her because she was raised in the church. And what she didn't understand was that behind her back, they were purposely grooming girls specifically to be raised up in the church, and then on their 18th birthday they'd be sacrificed sexually and then murdered after they had the baby. During pregnancy they would murder the woman after her 18th raping. And so the priest was in charge of the raping incident. But they had groomed the girls to not recognize any harm being done to them. And that's the societal grooming that has taken place on us, not for that specific purpose. It's a less maniacal purpose, but it's similar. I mean, that's why McDonald's hires people to tell them what color to paint their walls of their McDonald's stores, restaurants, is because if they want to let people think that they're in a friendly environment, they paint it yellow and use human experimentations for different locations around the world as to the societal grooming that people had gone through in their life in the different cultures around the world. And so that's how McDonald's has been so successful, is because they hired these specific people to identify the particular cities, cultures, brainwashing upbringing as to which colors will produce the more positive response, which is who will pay, keep coming back to pay more money to their store, their business. And so it's a kind of brainwashing manipulation that goes on, and we are not taught properly to identify that kind of effect in our lives, so that we can say, oh, wait a minute, no, you don't. And so when I was in grade school, for example, they brought out the color scheme. And we had to take a test and answer questions to determine what color are we. And it was red, yellow, blue, and white, from what I remember. I've looked online and they've altered the colors. There's now an orange and purple, and so they aren't using the same colors anymore as they did when I was in grade school. But it's based on the same principle. You convince people that they are that color. And so people then behave in that cyclical process. Oh, I'm a red, so I have to be aggressive and angry and blah, whatever was attached to it. And same for yellow, blue. I was blue or white or both, depending on how I answered the questions. I caught on real quick that it was nonsense, because it kept changing if I just put a different answer. And I realized that the answers were insufficient, which was why I kept fluctuating back and forth, because they're specifically designed to place you in their categories. And obviously we don't fit into the categories. That's not how human behavior functions, but that's how they trick us and trap us into the brainwashing manipulation. Is they make the categories, then set up the test to be generalized, so that when we answer, we then place ourselves in the categories. So they say, oh, it's not me, it's you. You answered the questions. That's how and so that's how they trap you. Same with psychiatry. When you go in, because the judge ordered you to, the psychiatrist, therapist, says, oh, sorry, man, you're mentally ill. The judge sent you here. You're mentally ill. You need to accept that. And the fact that you're not accepting it and you're in denial means that you are mentally ill. And we're here to help you. And so, like I told you, Stanley Smith Stevens is the one responsible for this categorization in the brainwashing manipulation. He's Mormon from Ogden. He's now dead, thank God. I think it was back in the 70s when he died. I can't remember when. Just look him up. Stanley Smith Stevens, Mormon from Ogden, moved to Colorado. Ogden. It's his thing. That's where we get the terms dichotomous and non-dichotomous classification. And so this Logan guy was Peter Ambrose. He got ensnared into the Mormon usage of this pseudoscience brainwashing manipulation to destroy his life for the rest of his life, because he's dumb enough to fall for it. And so when they assigned him to go to the state hospital, it's amazing how many people, once they plead guilty, are all of a sudden found competent. That's why they expected me to be there forever, because they knew I had done nothing wrong, and therefore I was in denial. And so by not pleading guilty, they knew they were going to trap me. And I told them going in, I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. They all laughed at me. Oh, you're mentally ill. Oh, they all say that. No, you're going to get out. Just plead guilty. But they can't say that, can they? But that's what they teach you, according to the laws of Utah, back then anyway. I recognize they changed it last year, so that the psychiatrists have full control to determine what constitutes competency. They've taken out all of the guidelines, so they most likely don't even have that class anymore with that guideline book, which means the evaluators now have full control over who passes and who doesn't. See, that's how I got out. Because the state of Utah, the legislature said, okay, you need these criteria to determine competence. And so the educational booklet that we were supposed to get lessons on, which they purposely had one hour class per week. There was like 9 or 12 different lessons, and so it was designed for 3 months, and that's the minimum stay. In California, it's different. I think it's just 1 week or 2 weeks, and they can identify competency or not. So Utah purposely established a system to keep people for a minimum of 3 months. And they expected that the torture that you go through there would be sufficient enough for you to say, I plead guilty, please get me the hell out of here. And yes, lots and lots and lots of people did that. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with mental illness, there are some legitimate cases of those who have brain damage and brain malfunctions, and not just behavioral problems. Behavioral problem is not a mental illness, but Valley Mental Health changed their name to Valley Behavioral Health, lost a lot of employees in the process because they wanted to include behavioral problems. And no, that's not a mental illness. And so you guys who know nothing about any of this, you guys just trust that, they're doctors, they know what they're talking about, they know what's going on, and until you get caught up in it yourself, the majority of women, for example, they had an emotional outburst during that time of the month, lock them up, because they went too far with the emotional stress that they incurred during that time of the month. That's what I saw. Is women who were not mentally ill, they just got put into the system because of what they did during that time of the month. So it's not just for guys. That's why I trusted in marrying my second ex, was because I recognized that she also was a victim of Utah, Mormon Utah. And sure enough, she eventually confided in talking about her childhood. It was her parents who hung her out to dry. She was 17 years old, still under the control of her parents. And before she turned 18, there was an incident. And apparently it was her older sister, most likely, because her older sister also almost had her drink bleach. So there was no coronavirus back then. But yeah, she ate a brownie, and then she didn't know where she was, didn't know what happened. She was naked when her parents came home, and yeah, the parents called the bishop. Bishop came over, get her to a mental hospital. She just took a marijuana brownie that her sister had made, and she got in the system for the rest of her life. Drugged now 37 years? 37 years of drugging. They can't diagnose her with anything, so they just go back and forth. The latest is it's bipolar. You know why it's bipolar? Because she's a druggie. They drugged her 37 years now. And so when she takes her drug for the morning, she's on a high. And then by the end of the evening, when the drug wears off, time to take it again, but they make sure that she goes to sleep to take it in, and so that causes problems that way because of the scheduling. But in the evening time, that's when she's and so they call it bipolar disorder. But it's because of the drugs she's been given, and she doesn't see it because she's drugged, and because they've been brainwashing her. Oh, you have a problem. See, you got to take your meds. Oh man, you keep going to the hospital because of the downtime when she gets violent and angry. And so they purposely caused her to be in that category. And they say, oh wow, bipolar, we got you trapped now. And so, yeah, it was sad that they all ganged up on us to get her out of our marriage. And so she needs to be detoxed to see if there is anything wrong. And I don't think there is. But in our marriage, I was recognizing memory problems. And so yeah, I'm concerned. But nobody will listen to me. So it's afternoon now. Let's check to see if it got put in by the clerks before the day is out. Also notice it's the long weekend. Memorial Day weekend's on Monday. So her filing on the 21st, yesterday, those two motions to dismiss and call it moot for the other explains that she was intending to give a final judgment today before the long weekend. But again, the previous times that I checked this morning, there was nothing. Still nothing. And now it's 12 hours, and yeah. So if there is something filed, the clerks held it till afternoon, and I'm not going to find out now until tomorrow morning if she filed something. If she didn't file something, then we have to just wait until she makes her decision to file and give an order one way or the other. Of note, Gaddy versus COP. In that case, which is a perfectly system process, which is not like mine at all. In that one, the church filed on time. Kay Birmingham replied on time also. And the judge, after they fired Judge First, Judge Plead, who was assigned to the case, then said, okay, well, we'll hold a hearing for the motion to dismiss. They have the hearing, and then he waited and waited and waited to finally say, nope, motion to dismiss is granted without prejudice. And so Kay Birmingham was allowed to refile, and she has done so. I wonder if hers, Gaddy, the COP. Okay, May 18th. She did file an amended complaint at 2:47 p.m. on May 18th. And there it is. The exhibit of the LDS org chart. Ooh, because hers is also RICO. Oh, did you learn from my case? Good for you. Because this was also going to be in my evidence exhibit, was the LDS organizational chart, to compare with the organized crime chart of America, the mafia organization crime chart. They match. You can overlay them, and they match. The only difference that the church has is that they have 2 counselors instead of 1. In the Italian, it's called a consigliere. So I hope that's what you're doing. Good for you. Then an audio transcript of S. Snow, an exhibit from the Hill Cumorah, Smith translating plates. Preach My Gospel. First Vision by Del Parson. First Vision from Social SS. Sunday School Manual, Smith's First Vision, Orthodox version, which is the Pearl of Great Price version. Stills from film, Joseph Smith, Prophet of the Restoration. Ooh, she's going hard on the First Vision, being the bicentennial year of the First Vision. She needs to do more research into what I've done about it. It would help your case. But mine should be over now anyway. But yeah, that's where they at. She refiled now on the 18th. And so the reason why my case is that's it. It's over. The church is done. Because, first, the church lawyers filed late. On Friday, the 10th of April, they filed the motion to dismiss. And that was 11 days late. And that's it. All I had to do was say, default. I was going to go in on the 31st of March to put in the default. Coronavirus prevented me from doing so. They, however, didn't let coronavirus get in their way, as they waited till a week after conference and filed. And their motion to dismiss. And I went over that in my reading of it. And so Then on the 21st, I find out that there's a clerk's order denying my motion for entry of default. And I thought it was, I didn't understand that. And it took me a while to say, oh, re-14, got it. So it's number 14 where I filed the entry of default for the judges, because I demanded their recusal. I put a motion for their recusal, and that's what Judge Oberg denied, was my motion to recuse. Moot 12, motion for recusal. And so when I finally understood, I also sent on the 21st through email, because I found out all the email procedures, and submitted email filing, and that was my reply to the lawsuit. And so on, I put in that reply that they were 11 days late. Sure enough, in the mail on the 25th showed that they had filed on the 23rd the certificate of service. They forgot on the 10th to serve me. And so I said, I never got this. I'm seeing here on the docket that they filed the motion to dismiss. I didn't receive it. I can't respond, but they were 11 days late. They're an entry of default that needs to be placed on the record, and it never got put on by the clerks. This is coronavirus time. They have a system of emails, because where was it that it's email? I saw it somewhere. Changes accordingly. I can't find it here. It must be on the actual letter that I got with reassignment. So yeah, that must be where it is. But they have an email system so that you don't have to keep going down to the courthouse time after time. But they never, Judge First never allowed me a service of process so that I can have a system set up until I finally found the waiver of summons. And thus they were 11 days late in responding on time to the waiver of summons. But because they didn't serve me, I made note of it on the 21st, as they also got emailed, and so on 2 days later, they then file mine, send it in the mail, and I received it on the 25th of April. 24 days late, because 23rd plus 1 day, 24. And then Judge First continues to do nothing, and all she had to do was say, oh, okay, Travis is right. They're an entry of default, and Travis wins. That's according to the letter of the law, if the judge is going to follow the book. Judge First didn't. She did nothing. She let her time go. She's gone. So on the 15th of May, they finally reassigned a new judge. Not just a newly appointed judge, but a newly appointed judge. We are her first case. And so I found out that Saturday morning as I did the video on it, and I resubmitted my reply, which never got put on the docket, and made notice that my original did not get put on the docket. Notice also my resubmission also has not been placed on the docket. If you go to Gaddy's case docket, her reply was put on the docket. The clerks are refusing to put mine on the docket. What is mine that would cause them not to want to put it on the docket? Let me bring that up for you. So yeah, we're taking some time on this one for you guys. Let's see. There's the second motion for service of process. It would be in a final order my case. Motion, default judgment. See, these should be listed on here, on the docket online, and they're not. The clerks are refusing to put it on. And so here it is. Motion 2 for number 1, final default judgment. 2, entry of default. 3, strike motion to dismiss. 4, disbarment and disciplinary action. That was the bombshell I was telling you about from the beginning of all this back last year. That I had something special in mind, or in place, once the lawyers filed their reply. And that was it. Because you cannot be a lawyer licensed in the state of Utah, working for the government, in essence, defending a client, following the laws of the land, and yet still be loyal, first and foremost, to the church. Can't be done. And in my reply motion, in this right here, I explain why they are to be disbarred and disciplined. And it's similar to the request for recusal. It's because of that they give loyalty to the church rather than to the United States of America, its Constitution, and its laws. And did I put the temple thing in here? No, I did not. It was just the payment of tithing, the racketeering part of it. In the recusal, though, I quoted the temple text, the law of consecration. You remember that, Mormons, don't you? So, yeah, I quoted that in there. She did strike down the motion for recusal, so I'm kind of wondering, is she going to dismiss the other information that was put in there, because she has denied it as moot. But she should get an understanding for my motion to disbar from that, though. The service of process, the second one had some information in there that was pertinent to the case. Let's see. Second motion, I have 2 versions. Let's bring up that one. Okay, that was the note version. This, therefore, would be... Okay, so it's the PDF version. Huh. Okay. Yeah, this is just the information part of it. I didn't put in the cover page and all that for it. that would be in the files. So let's see. This is what I put in the second motion for service of process, and I attached some evidence with it, and so I'll read it to you again. At the hearing held 1 November 2019 before Judge Evelyn J. Furse, I, the plaintiff, was instructed to amend my complaint within 30 days. The plaintiff informed the court that the current federal administration may shut down the government again, as was done previously. However, the government was not shut down when it had coronavirus. The plaintiff has filed Your Honor's amended request on the 25th of November. The plaintiff has filed for and was approved by this court for in forma pauperis. As such, the plaintiff has also filed for motion for service of process. As this filing is the second such filing, the plaintiff has researched the costs of paying for service of process on his own, and $100 minimum is the standard rate. It has been reported by the Washington Post originally that the defendant has been reported by a whistleblower to the IRS incident to matters related to counts in the plaintiff's case. And in regards to speculation in the plaintiff's request for relief, that the defendant's monetary amount exceeds hundreds of billions. The plaintiff's case includes notification of the previous case in part against the defendant, in which Judge Dale Kimball conducted. It was actually Benson. He was involved in the preliminary part. Benson finished me off. That needed to be corrected, but this has now been denied. And so I don't know if this information will be considered with the final judgment. Judge Kimball was given a motion to recuse based upon the Code of Conduct for United States Judge Canon 1 and 2, but refused and then denied the plaintiff's petition, exposing the plaintiff to constant assaults by the defendant's agents. This court must know that Judge Kimball, upon plaintiffs being secured away in the Utah State Hospital, was hired by the defendant at their Brigham Young University after being made a senior district court judge in 2009. If you do us a favor, though, the plaintiff's experience in filing with the federal court back in the 2000s has caused the plaintiff to notice a number of differences this time around. Upon first filing with this court, the clerk mentioned that I could submit the defendant's copy of the complaint, which I did in the 2000s, but it was 2006, from what I found out. But the plaintiff chose this time to wait. The plaintiff's second time presenting motions and filings to the court, the previous clerk saw the plaintiff approaching and walked away from her desk. The second clerk has since been the only one to handle the plaintiff's filings and informed the plaintiff not to submit the copy of the complaint for the defendant until the motion for service of process is approved. She then came back smiling from then on, which was only the one other time after this, because she was reprimanded. The plaintiff's case identifies the defendant as a criminal organization with the same organizational structure, just with different names presented by the plaintiff. Agents identified the plaintiff are associates in organized crime. As Utah is the headquarters for the defendant, it is likely that my serving in this court are agents associates for the defendant, such as Judge Clark Waddups, who also is a senior district judge who oversees this case. Clerks and United States Marshals are likely to include agents for the defense as well. The plaintiff's case points out that agents for the defendant also give oaths of loyalty to the defendant over the United States government and the Constitution, and are also required to pay the defendant protection money called tithing, which was a part of the previous mentioned whistleblower's complaint to the IRS. The plaintiff's case mentions continuing assaults upon the plaintiff by agents of the defendant. Delays place the plaintiff in continuous harm, as there is also an active attempt currently in progress to cover up evidence by agents for the defendant. That was when I caught the church trying to cover up that they were paying the person who had me disappeared to the Utah State Hospital in 2008. The plaintiff hereby gives notification of concern that the delay for approving the plaintiff's motion for service of process is related to this conflict of interest, as it already appears to violate the Code of Conduct for United States Judges Canon 1, 2, and 3, and 4. The plaintiff hopes that with this second motion for service of process that there will be no further delays in approval. I can hope all I want. It was never granted. And yes, like I said, on the 13th of March, the defense counsel sent me a death threat. On the 13th of March, Friday the 13th of March. Why do we have the superstition of Friday the 13th with Jason Voorhees? It's Jason Voorhees, right? Jason's the Friday the 13th, not the Michael Myers is Halloween. Okay. Yeah. Do you know where that comes from? Knights Templar attacked by the Catholic Pope and the king of the one European nation, and scattered the Knights Templar, just destroying them from ever being a part of the Holy Grail and all that. And thus, the York Rites Freemason Lodge has as their highest rank the continuation of the Knights Templar that had been disbanded. What year was that? That was a long time ago. 1300s, I think it was, because it was 1363 that the Knights Templar had come to America and established the Kensington land ownership stone and with the Mandan Indian tribe to take possession in the future all the land east, and had buried gold plates in Egyptian in southern Illinois, in the caves of southern Illinois. So, not a coincidence, and that's where X marks the spot for the total solar eclipses. When Joseph Smith said we need to have the cities, the mountain cities of Zion and New Jerusalem built in southern Illinois before the Christ comes. Now, if you don't know who Joseph Smith meant by the Christ, because it's not Jesus of the Gospels, I've been telling you guys this over and over and over again, but Mormons don't want to hear it. This is your founding prophet, our founding prophet. You'd think you want to know what he meant, but Mormons just don't do it. So I will type into my computer program to be quicker. Man like Moses. Section 103, verse 16. But we go back to 15 for context. Behold, I say unto you the redemption of Zion. What is the redemption of Zion? That's the restoration of the kingdom of David. That's what the Knights Templar were doing with the Holy Grail. It was not a grail. It was a blood lineage of a mortal man who is to would come in the future to restore the kingdom of David from the Egyptian kingdom of David. The 18th dynasty, David Moses's. With the founder of that 18th dynasty, by the way, being Moses. Yah being the Hebrew God that the Jews keep telling us. It's only found in English in one place, which is in Psalms. But it is multiple. It's throughout the Bible, if we were to translate it correctly. Yah Moses in Egyptian refers to the restorer of the kingdom of David. Moses was a restorer of the kingdom of David. That's what Yah Moses was doing. He, as the founder of the 18th dynasty, kicking out the Hyksos from Egypt, their dynasties ended, and the new dynasty began, and he called himself Yah Moses. Yah is the moon god, which is attributed symbolically to the god Thoth, David. And so that's why the other kings, Tawut, Thoth, is David, phonetically the same. And Moses is composed of the two symbols. One is 3 skins, and the Egyptologists who did their grammar, they never explained which skin, what animal skin it is, but it's 3 skins tied together. That's Moses, and it refers to, or it means who is born. And it refers to the concept of the son who is to restore the kingdom of his murdered father, who had it usurped by the brother who murdered the father. And so that talks about Osiris, Set, and Horus, the son. That's what it's referring to as Moses. So Moses, as I've been telling you, is a story about Horus restoring the throne of his dead father, who was murdered by the usurping brother. And in this case, Moses, Horus, is confronting Pharaoh and saying, "You're not the legitimate Pharaoh. I am challenging you for the throne." That's what's really going on. But that story never actually happened in Egypt. It's not a historical document. There are historical persons associated with the characters in the Bible, but it didn't actually happen the way the Bible author tells it. He's telling the story of the original prophecy of Osiris, Set, and Horus. The Bible is a prophecy, not a history. A prophecy of when? Right now. So, like I said in my other videos, if I keep going, and these are hour-long stuff, you've got some good stuff that you want to keep listening to, but you guys don't listen. You stop the video already. Nobody's listening to this. This is gold that I'm giving you, and you're missing it. And so here, Joseph Smith is talking about the real Messiah, the real Christ, who is prophesied to come in the latter days to save the Jews, as Jeremiah says twice. And then there was that one other passage that I went over in Timothy. But it's understood by the Jews that Jews are supposed to be saved by the Messiah, physically saved, so that they can finally relax and not have to worry about being slaughtered. And they're still waiting. That's why they don't accept the Jesus of the gospel narratives, because the Jesus is also a prophecy going all the way back to the original Osiris, Set, Horus. That's where they get all the stories from. They just assembled them all into a different narrative under the Roman period rather than the Egyptian period of the 18th dynasty. And so here Joseph Smith shows he understands, not just because he named God Sun Amun, which is the Egyptian god of the Amun priesthood during the 18th dynasty. And so you have section 84 that talks about Moses does away with the Amun priesthood, just like Akhenaten of the 18th dynasty did. But even though he is Moses, the history is not as the Bible says. So there was no parting of the Red Sea. It was the Reed Sea, and it refers to the afterlife. It's talking about going through baptism being essential to exaltation. And Mormons are like clueless when I tell them that. If people choose not to be exalted in the highest degree of the celestial kingdom, they don't need to be baptized. What? No! We're doing the work for everybody so that everybody can then choose. No, they've already chose. They don't want to be exalted. We don't need to baptize them. No! So, yeah, Mormons are dumb because they don't do the study necessary. And the church won't let them do the study necessary. Oh, that's deep doctrine. I just want to study the basics, faith and repentance. Yeah, but you're not doing that either. And so here it is. Therefore, verse 16, I will raise up. He needs to be born as a mortal man and raised up unto whose people? My people. Who's talking here? Joseph Smith. Whose people? The Mormons. But there's no need for them if the church is righteous, because it's just the president of the church. There's no need to fulfill Moses confronting the wicked Melchizedek to restore the kingdom of David. Which means that the current president of the church is the false prophet, the false Christ, the false Messiah. That's Nelson right now. Before him it was Monson. Before him it was Hinckley. Before him it was Hunter. Before him it was Benson. You getting the point? Brigham Young was not authorized. He murdered Joseph Smith and usurped the throne. Just like Set usurped the throne by murdering his brother Osiris. And Joseph Smith understood this, as he said, I will raise up unto the Mormons a man, who shall lead them like as Moses led the children of Israel. Joseph understood. He was in the York Rites, and we know he understood that, because what about the Book of Mormon? Oh, it's buried gold plates in Egyptian. But it was in western New York, not in southern Illinois. But that's exactly where Joseph said they need to build the city of New Jerusalem and Zion. So the Book of Mormon was plagiarized to encode the warning that there will be an apostasy in the church and a coup d'etat of the American government to put a king on the throne of America. And you Mormons don't want to hear it. You've already shut me off. You've put your thumbs down. Unless I put a little notification like I did in the other video today. So, yeah, that's where we're at right now. We are waiting for Judge Daphne A. Oberg to decide the fate of mankind. Literally. I don't think she grasps the seriousness of her situation. The church has already threatened her through the judges. She's brand new as a judge. She's assigned to my case first. And so she knows, because she denied the motion for service of process where I informed her that Judge First was threatened in the motion for recusal. That's where I mentioned Judge First is in a conflict of interest because she was fired for allowing Gaddy versus COP. So yes, Judge Oberg knows. So these orders informs me she knows. But will she wait now until closing time for the long weekend? Will she be strict to follow the laws of the United States? Or will she cave under the extortion threat of the church agents who are working in the court, who put her in the job, and say, I have to side with the church because I don't want to die, which is what Judge First did. Sort of. Well, she didn't side with anybody. She just said, I'm not handling this. She was Pontius Pilate. I wash my hands. I'm going to let some other judge deal with it instead. Fulfilling prophecy. Amazing. So the Jesus gospel narrative prophesies that I'm going to be crucified and not save the Jews. And so the Jews will have to look for somebody else who's never going to come if I fail. And so again, I ask you Mormons, who are you choosing to follow? Which side of history do you choose to belong on? Or as we now talk about in our generation, which team are you on? Team Church or Team Travis? So lame. So, like I said, my case is historical. You guys don't fully grasp this yet. Because all this information I'm giving you is like, what the hell? You don't know about it. You were never taught it. You were never educated. You were never researching it. The church leaders tell you to study your scriptures until you find out that the church is wrong. And then they're like, no, no, you went too far. You have to be excommunicated now. They extort you to remain loyal. And you fall for it. You say, oh, yes, almighty masters. You give loyalty to men, to obey men. And we all got punked. So, oh man, over an hour indeed. Yeah, you guys are not listening to me at all anymore. So I'm going to have to put a note in the beginning. You really need to listen to the whole video, and we'll see if anybody does. But I mean, you guys are unemployed, aren't you? Or you're dead. I hope you didn't do it by drinking bleach. Please tell me you didn't drink bleach. That should have been your tip-off that Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. He's not in your best interests.